Don't even remember your own cold opens when you do a retake. You're not used to doing those for a podcast, but man, this is not. This is a good reason that this is not the first take of this podcast. By the way, welcome to the Tilted Roll podcast. As you can tell, I am once again a lone gunner, and that is mainly because of scheduling issues that actually came as a result. It's actually not really inherently my or Franny's fault, mostly just due to poor utilization of our time, because we are currently planning a super awesome podcast that I'm really excited for. It's going to involve a lot of cool things and people. It's going to involve a cool person, and I'm very excited. It's going to, really help us out with our announcement. I'm going to move my audio readings over to my left here so I can see them in my peripherals. And I know if I'm blowing out anything, it's too crazily here. But yeah, I'm very excited for everything that's going to be happening in the next coming days, or in the next podcast, hopefully. And hopefully then obviously we will also have Franny, which will help us out for sure. Otherwise then we will be planning out something though really cool. So definitely get ready for that. But otherwise, enough excuses, because we ain't here for excuses. We are here for a podcast, and that's what I'm going to give you. And I wanted to kind of go over again one of the utilizations of the going technology lists, or going full pencil and paper in D&D. And part of that is going into the spell cards, which I mentioned in that last podcast. However, my cards are out of order now. I've messed something up. Okay, here we go. One of the things that I mentioned in that episode was these spell cards. They are super cool, and they can be really handy there we go, the camera focus. They can be super handy when trying to go entirely, entirely pencil and paper. Right now, if you're looking at it, these are the arcane deck. It's a pretty beefy deck. Like, it's a lot of these are, a lot of the other classes pretty much are maybe roughly, I would say maybe half the size of this. Like, one of these main decks, like, here's the actual size of half of the cards. Like, they come in 2 decks. Every box comes in 2 decks. This is one deck in the arcane set. It's the size of my forehead. Like, and I got a big forehead, like, receding hairline and everything really makes it stick out. So these are no joke, and these can be super hard to keep track of. It's something that I know I have definitely fallen with the issue of when I originally tried using these before I knew, or before there was like a D&D Beyond. Like, when I was starting out, I was the worst with keeping track of like what spells can do. Obviously, being able to keep track of how many you use is really easy because it's just as simple as a tally sheet. But what was really hard was always having to remember and keeping the player's handbook, footnoted or, kind of bookmarked. And especially when you're newer and you're with a newer group who all are not as familiar with the player's handbook, it makes it a lot harder. Because now suddenly everybody's constantly needing to, pass around the player's handbook, and you're not going to, and that's the thing, you can't keep asking for spells. It's really easy if you have something to let you know. And that's why I actually do, I do support these really wholeheartedly, especially for people who do want more of an old school experience, or like me, are trying to challenge themselves a little bit in some of the coming years. However, because as you can tell, these are a big deck. And the other issue is, if you'll notice here, if I am holding this correctly, I am. What you'll notice is it has the 3 symbols for Sorcerer, Wizard, and Warlock. And that's because this is just the arcane deck rather than some of the other ones. Hopefully the camera will focus back here soon. Hello? All right, come on. Let's come back here. Let's come back. Bring it back. Oh boy. All right, there we go. The biggest issue is obviously the fact that since 3 classes have to share this one deck set, if you grab the Druid deck, as long as you're only playing a Druid, you'll be fine. But if you're playing multiple arcane character classes, this can definitely start becoming a problem. So I wanted to talk about how to utilize these spell cards and be able to effectively and efficiently be able to switch between your different characters. And obviously, you're not planning on switching between characters a lot, very often. But, especially if you're an Adventure League player who maybe has multiple tiered characters and you plan to go to a convention, or just for pure, ease of organization, I want to go over exactly how you can organize some of these things to your betterment, and maybe what are some of the tips that I have in order to, ease your pencil and paper ways. So the first thing I want to bring up is the way you can store these in general. Obviously, if you plan to keep these in a binder, you're going to need a good number of pages, as since this is only half, there's quite a number of these. And if you plan on having multiple classes, that'll add up as well. However, card pages are not very expensive. I think are about $5. I think you can find them for like $5 for like 10 or 20 pages maybe. I'm going off the top of my head. It's not perfect, but I know for a fact that they are very inexpensive. I've seen them I've seen them on the shelf at the game shop that I go to every week that I've talked about plenty on this podcast. The Lake Geneva Games, when I go there often, when I visit there, I've seen the sheets. They're pretty cheap, very affordable. So you can get a good number of them for pretty low. And if you go on Amazon, obviously they're also plenty cheap. And you don't need to get very nice and expensive ones. If they break, they break. They're inexpensive. Therefore, you can get them for multiple times. But they only really break when you use them a lot. And if you're unfamiliar with exactly what I am referring to, we got some cards pulling out. Some of these are pretty old here, but if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I'm referring to something like these. The light's going to reflect a lot of this here. Let's see here. Let's hold this back here. But these are pretty common in a lot of trading card games. Again, hopefully we will focus. But these are pretty common in trading card games. Can we please? Camera? There you go. Like, it has to think about it. These are pretty common in trading card games. As you can tell, this is not entirely full. The pages are, and this is pretty old. This is actually from back when I was in high school. But it's obviously since it's filled with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. But these are a very good way to put everything in. Since I haven't entirely started prepping for my journey to pencil and paper, I have not yet effectively stored everything into either a binder or found a binder to store these into. So that definitely is something I'm hoping the autofocus will kick in here. Man, it was doing super good. This thing's autofocus is doing so good for so long, and I don't know why today it has decided just to totally take a crap. It's actually part of the reason why I redid the old one, or my last take, but we're good now. I've refixed it. Anyway, these pages can be really useful because of not only the fact that obviously there are nice grid. So you can tell this page is pretty unfilled because I've taken a lot of things out of it over time. And there are different places around some of my card game storage. But the fact that you can have 9 on multiple sides is super useful, because if you're going with does have an exact count on here, 257 cards. You're going to need a lot of pages. Let's actually quickly, let's do some math here. Let's grab a calculator. Let's do some math. So we're looking at 257 divided by 9. So you're going to need 29 pages at least in order to, I was doubting my math for a solid second. Sorry. But yeah, you're going to need a solid 29 pages in order to get all of the arcane cards into this, let alone you have other classes. But now that we've talked about, obvious ways to put these in here, now the question becomes, how best should you store them? Well, I'm going to talk first about if you have only one arcane caster character, and then you plan on having either whatever for your other classes. So say maybe you plan on playing a druid and then a warlock. Or actually, we'll go even bigger. We'll say a wizard. And I mean bigger in terms of available spell count. So let's say you're playing a wizard and a druid. A really great way to keep track of that stuff is, I don't know why I have tape over this, but is if you get these kind of nice, and if you can find these like smaller books, what these are super useful for. So they are filled with a number of pages. You can tell this one is actually pretty thick here. Bring it up to the camera. Hopefully it'll focus. But that looks like a no. But you can tell it's pretty thick even with it out of focus. And now while this one is 4 slots on each side, and I would argue that, arguably actually this is old. This is from the 90s. And it's held up really well. The only thing that's obviously really broken off is parts of the spine is frayed a little bit, and the locking mechanism is no longer on here. But this is a Pokemon binder, by the way. I just don't feel like taking the tape off right now. But this can be things like this. So if you can find these small binders, what these can be really useful for is perfectly acting as your character's spell book. And I'm pretty sure you can find actually things like this on things like Etsy, or if you go to conventions. But things like this can be really useful if you only plan on having the one character with, one arcane caster and one maybe like a druid or something like that. And actually what you can do is all you really need to do then is just fill these up with whatever things your character can know. So obviously eventually if you're a wizard, most of this deck will probably need to go in there at some point. But if you want, you can pick and choose the spells that you will likely ever need to swap in and out of your spell book, because you can add a large number of spells to your spell book, but obviously it doesn't mean they're always prepared. So it's one of those things where if you want, you can utilize these as just prepared spell lists, or just exactly as the way the game generally operates, where this is your spell book, and maybe your front page or 2 or 3 are your prepared spells, whereas then the rest of this is just what's available in your spell book, what is available in your character spell book. And things like this are what really help kind of drive that, that sense of integration into the world and the thematics of your game. That's kind of why, this is actually what I plan to do. Is I plan to either, if not use this one, I plan to use one I can find, if I can find like a more fantasy looking one, I will probably do that. But this is actually what I plan to doing for any of my arcane casters. By the way, if you want to go artificer, right now you're kind of SOL. You have to just kind of mix and match between other card decks. So for example, for my artificer that I plan to do in the near future, I'm going to have to kind of combine parts of this and parts of my druid deck as well, which might become a little herring. So I might buy a cleric deck just for safekeeping. But otherwise, this is a really good way of being able to utilize these, because you are actually just kind of creating a spell book. So think of it then, and similarly you can do this part you can do with the 9-panel binder, the 9-panel binder. And I'm wrong, it's 18 per page. So my 29 page count before was wrong. It's 9 per side, but it's 18 a page, which means you only need 15 pages, which actually is super easy, especially with the 3 wins. So you could probably fit a good amount of the spells into your spell book, right? You could probably so what you could utilize is, if you have a large number of pages in your binder, you can split them up by characters if you have multiple types. So if you're planning you're planning on playing a sorcerer, but then your other character is a wizard. Now, obviously, you're trying to split the 1 arcane pack, because I'm not going to tell you to go buy another $24 set of cards. That's not what we're here for. We're here to find the easiest way to do these things. And the easiest way is with one deck. And that's because all you need to do is inherently retain the positions of certain spells. So what I mean by that is, let's say, we'll kind of open this page here. We'll use this page as an example right here. So we'll say right here, and I should have moved. I should have moved my mic stand, but I decided not to for some reason because I was like, oh, I can hold it super easy, right? No, we're gonna do that now. Come to me. Come to me, mic stand. I'm trying to do this with one hand. It's not easy. I bet that sounded super clean. I bet it did. Not. Based on the audio readout I'm currently seeing, it likely did not. All right, but now I have hands. So, let's kind of say utilize, these 4 pages, right? So you have these 4 pages are part of, character A. So, say now both your sorcerer and your wizard have the spell Chill Touch, which is actually right here, funny enough. So what you could do is you can put Chill Touch, and I actually have to put it in the other side here. Well, you can put Chill Touch, if I would put it in the right way, right into this slot. So this is character A. All right, so character A, now it's Chill Touch. So now let's go to character B. Let's say it's a few pages down. So now character B. So this is where character B starts. Character B now has you leave this spot open. We'll pull these cards out so the image kind of sets home here. So now this spot is completely clear. So you can see there's nothing in that slot right now. And that's because obviously we're utilizing the other slot here for Chill Touch. But having the spot empty, so being able to see the reverse of another card or anything like that, will help notify you that there is a missing spell. And what you can utilize is keeping the same slot, essentially allocating slots in a page. So page 1 slot, so we'll say this is page 1 slot 2. We'll say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So page 1 slot 2 has Chill Touch. So if page 1 slot 2 of character B is empty, you know that it's sharing this spell Chill Touch with the same spell page and number set in your other character. Now you're probably asking me, well, what if your characters have different spell numbers? And it's a great question. Then it kind of becomes utilizing either a note or some type of proxy. So what you could always do is just copy. The other thing you could do is you could just photocopy these cards, cut them out, put them in a different spot. It's obviously the other easiest thing to do, especially if you have multiple cards. If you have multiple cards to do this with, this may actually become the better option overall. But the reason that I kind of market the idea of using the slots, like the slot sections, is just because if you don't want to worry about utilizing too much paper, like a big thing that I'm a proponent of is not wasting paper and not trying to use too much paper around the house and whatnot. I would definitely, if you don't have many of these spells, I would try to just see how much you can match the pages. So if anything, having a cantrip page, having a spell page, first level spell page, second level spell page, roughly they should be about the same. And then all you need to do is make sure all of your shared spells are at the fronts of those pages. So again, if you don't want to use proxies and you don't want to waste paper, one thing you could definitely just do is make sure the shared spells are at the front of those pages. So that's the part of the recap. Split your pages. Make sure that if you're starting a new level of spell, so say from cantrip to level 1 spell, that you are exclusively just that you start that at a fresh page. The first level spells get a fresh page. So maybe your cantrips are only taking up half of the amount of page space they could be. Just do a new page and take up that one. Otherwise, I would just then, and then from there, just make sure all of the shared spells are at the front. That way they can easily utilize the same number of pages, because every one of your spell pages are going to have a page 1. Like a level 1, page 1, slot 2 will always exist. There may not always be a page 3 or a page 4 for certain spells, but there are certain spaces in line with that. And then obviously, what the heck? Did not do that? Origin, thank you. Origin installer just tried to update, I think, because that's what I'm going for right now. as I was saying, the big thing you want to do is just have some type of like line of like demarcation as to when then your prepared spells begins and when your spell book begins, or at least potential spells you can swap between. And obviously this is a problem that is innately, this can be utilized for any of the other spells. Like if you have two different druids that you're playing between, maybe one's AL, maybe one's part of your campaign that's at a table that's just with your friends. Sorry. Sorry. I've been talking for a while. Then obviously like the same thing can be applied. If you're playing a cleric, same thing. Just less card space. Then obviously the other things you can do, other options if you don't want a binder and you kind of want some easy ways to just manage multiple decks, is if you're like me and you are a former Yu-Gi-Oh player, or you're okay with maybe, or you're currently one, or anything else. What you can do is you can get there are a number of tins for a number of sections that you can get like a little card tin for different card games. And I've actually utilized this for multiple things. Right now, I have Weiss Schwarz cards in here. But the reason I wanted to bring these out was because I wanted to pull out one of my decks, because the other thing you can utilize to your advantage, if I can find them, they're not in here, so I will utilize my other ones just for the sake of it, are card sleeves. So right now, as you can see here, this will be a Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds card sleeve. This is from this tin originally. But you can utilize card sleeves to really effectively delineate what characters are. So if you want to use either a deck box or a... Hey. The dog is like nipping at stuff. Getting all weird. You're getting all weird. But yeah, if you want to utilize either a deck box, which you common if you are or were a Magic the Gathering player, or you just have like multiple trading card stuffs around, getting things like card sleeves and multiple deck boxes, or ways just to be able to hold your differentiate your card characters will help you out. And then obviously I would advocate, if you don't want to use a binder and you just want to use like these decks, I would much more advocate for making proxies then, just because of the usefulness of, well, it's a lot harder to keep track then of like what slots are, because you can make a note on your character sheet or somewhere on your computer as to like where your shared cards go in your binder, right? But it's really hard to do that. It's a little harder to do that with a deck, or even just like, the thing is, with the binder system, you don't even need notes in your computer, whereas this, you would need some type of note on your computer as to what your shared spells are. And obviously your character sheet is a good usage of that as well. You can just refer to your character sheet and you can just see like, hey, what spell am I missing? Those are obviously the easy answers. But if you want to utilize multiple decks in a quick fashion, especially if you're at like a convention, I just would recommend using proxies. It's something that also can just help you have the cards, as long as you're not sharing them with other people, in terms of, trying not to make wizards look at me like, how dare you advocate copyright. As long as you're not redistributing them, no one's really going to care. You own the cards, so therefore it's whatever. But as long as you're not redistributing them, then it's fine. Obviously, don't buy proxy cards. Anybody out there? It's a waste of your time. It's what I would call a ripoff. Don't even do that. But you can utilize, obviously, if you own them, you can set proxies for yourself just to make it a little bit easier to keep track if you have multiple cards or multiple characters. But otherwise, in terms of the deck stuff, that's pretty much it. I plan to utilize, like I said, I plan to utilize these books like this. Something that's a little smaller. The downside I had with having a binder all the time, usually, yes, I have to have some type of binder for character sheets, or in like a folder, or either that or a folder. And I've been using a binder for character sheets, but I actually would rather keep my binder at home and just use that for long-term storage. where then I would like to use just a folder for bringing it to sessions and whatnot, just because the binder does take up space in your backpack. And when you're going computerless, you're just going full pencil and paper, you do want to keep good reference books around just in case you need them. Sure, it's easy to look up on your phone if you own the ebooks. Looking that stuff up on your phone isn't really against the rules of like going totally paperless. But if you want to go hardcore, then obviously you should bring some books. And I do want to have books around just for the sake of having them. There's something nice about going to a session, having your books with you. It just having value to the physical books is just kind of nice. Despite that, most of what I have bought recently have all been the virtual books on D&D Beyond, but a lot of that reason is because of the shows. Like, it's kind of the way I have to get these books. If we did our shows entirely in person and I didn't have to worry about a virtual, character sheets, and whatnot, and I can just give them information right there in person, it'd be great. But I don't have that luxury. We have to do our shows over the internet just because we don't have things like a studio space and the availability to bring people in for travel every week. This is how we can still have people like Dylan, who live hours and hours away from us, still be able to play. And obviously nothing stopping you from yourself without our necessity of running a show. There's nothing stopping yourself from doing all of these techniques, even on your virtual tabletops. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But because I have to give information to my players in our campaign setting and we have to share content, we as our Natural One, we buy the books and information that people would need in order to run these, for us to run our games. So that's why it's really important for us to kind of utilize that stuff, and why I can't go entirely, full pencil and paper in 2020. I am debating, though, of just utilizing, essentially, of just turning off my character sheet when I'm doing Embers by Daybreak, and just updating it for Franny's sake, for when he needs to do any DMing shenanigans. But otherwise, I'm kind of debating. I feel like I don't have to entirely use my character sheet on D&D Beyond. If I don't have to entirely use it during the session, I can easily make the space. If I make the space on my desk, I can make the use case for utilizing a pencil and paper while running that campaign, or while playing in that campaign. But for things like I almost called it this is like an old name of this campaign. The Evercrescent Moon. When I'm the DM, I just cannot DM. I can't DM that game without a computer. It's too complicated, and it's not something I would say is. I mean, it's a challenge. If you want to do it, by all means, go for it. But it's not part of my challenge, right? It's kind of like how I feel about a lot of Pokemon challenges, right? Like, a lot of people do weird. Whenever I see these Pokemon channels or challenges on YouTube, for example, for some reason I'll see like, oh, well, I need to do this with no items in battle, no held items, blah blah blah. I can't go to a Pokemon Center, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Like, to me, what's annoying about that is like it's creating a challenge to enjoy the game. Right? Like, it's almost like the only way that the game can be enjoyed is to create a challenge. It's what it feels like sometimes. And I know that's not obviously the case with these people that make the challenges. They do it because they want to make a fun challenge that's interesting and entertaining for the YouTube audience. And that's fine. I'm not dogging on them. I'm just saying that the big thing that I wanted to do when I did this challenge is that I didn't want to do it for the challenge's sake. I wanted to do it for the sake of having a unique experience, right? Because what I will not deny is that those people who make those challenges do it for the sake of the challenge, right? They are only doing it for the sake of doing a challenge. But that's not what I want. Like, I want to do this for the sake of just having an interesting and a unique experience that I haven't had since I kind of started playing D&D. A little bit. I guess I used it a little bit with I did do a lot of pencil and paper early on with 5e. It wasn't really until the last 2 years or so that I utilized a lot more of a virtual character sheet one way or another, either through D&D Beyond or without. And sure, I had to utilize the books a lot for background information up until last year, but even for the last few years, pretty much ever since I started our first campaign of Shadows of an Empire, which was on my Twitch channel, that was something that just was inherent. It's just something that constantly was in my system, was just utilizing a virtual character sheet, lists, ways of keeping track. Like Roll20 was a big part of the reason I used that, was because it helped me keep track of enemies. That was something that just I couldn't utilize. I didn't want to utilize without a computer. And to me, it's something that I still don't want to do. I would rather keep utilizing the computer, at least for being a DM. But as a player, even during Embers by Daybreak, I don't feel like I have to be held to the computer. So I think I will extend my challenge into at least being a player for Embers by Daybreak. Obviously, I'll have to utilize some things, but not everything. So that at least will be fun. But luckily, I don't have to keep a spell book for Percival in Embers by Daybreak. So that'll make it at least a little more useful. But that'll be the end of this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you also are planning to partake in a similar strategy. If you would like to do the challenge of going an entire year without utilizing any type of virtual character sheet, or essentially just going entirely pencil and paper as a player or even as a DM or both, by all means, challenge yourself to whatever your whim is. But let me know if you're doing that in the comments below, and let me know if there's anything else you would like to see in the special video dedicated. It's going to be shorter than this, the shorter but dedicated video about going totally pencil and paper in 2020. Let me know if you want to know anything about that seeing that video in the comments below. Otherwise, hey, if you like this episode, hit like on it. Helps me know whether or not I'm doing a good job of producing these, getting these out on time. Well, this is a bad example, but just producing these and trying to get them out within the time that they're supposed to. And if not, let me know what you'd like to see down below. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.